Hey everybody, I just wanted to take some time to answer a great question that we had in class the other day that I figured probably was on some of your minds because it is something that I hear this question quite a bit, particularly when I want to talk about this class. And the question was simply, why would I go ahead and spend my own money to buy something that I can get either a better interest rate or like a 0% interest rate, and I can put my money away to hopefully get a better interest rate and gain more money. We see these a lot of times. If you go to buy a car and you can get 0% interest for 5 years, so you essentially make payments at no cost to you, essentially. So some misconceptions about that that I just kind of want to address and kind of talk to you about that. So first of all, the first point I guess I have to make is there's no such thing as a free lunch. I can pretty much guarantee you that, I said, there are people involved in this process, the people that make these deals, the finance people behind them, that have degrees, like I said, that have been to school for years and years. They're in the business of making money. You're not going to find a way to outsmart them and somehow, like I said, get a better deal in the process. So the first thing is no such thing as a free lunch. So if you're trying to outsmart them, just don't even try. The second thing kind of goes back to that example that Dave talked about with regards to buying the dining room set, if you remember from that very first lesson, the Super Savers. And that was simply the point that likely in order to get that deal, the 0% interest, you're going to have to pay retail, which, as we know, is likely going to be a higher cost. So when you want that 0% interest or the lower interest rate, you lose your ability to negotiate, which you ultimately lose a better opportunity to get a better price in the long run. And last point, and probably honestly the most important one, that whenever we're talking about making big financial decisions, oftentimes we never factor in risk. And risk is probably one of the biggest problems involved in any sort of financial transaction, because it is a part. It does factor into these decisions, but unfortunately, we don't have an accurate way of quantifying it. So take, for instance, the example, if you were to go ahead and buy that car, 0% interest, what happens if you lose your job and suddenly you can't make a payment? Most of them have clauses built in that if somehow you miss a payment or something like that, oftentimes they can go and retroactively charge you interest on payments that you've already made in the past because it's in some sort of fine print. Or, like I said, at that point, they can either up the interest rate to just astronomical amounts. So there are fine prints that are built into these things that make them very, very dangerous. And as I said, you're playing with snakes when you play with these people. Second thing is, what happens if you get into a car wreck, 2 years down the line, and all of a sudden, the insurance company hands you a check? Well, likely that car has depreciated in value. So say, for instance, you buy a $25,000 car, and in 2 years, it may have depreciated, 30% of its value. So it's down to, say, $16,000, $15,000, we'll say at this point. At that point, what if the, let's say, insurance company says it's only worth, 12, but you still have to pay, at a higher amount? You're upside down on that car at that point. And unfortunately, you're going to be out the difference. So ultimately, you can't predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen. So the risk is probably that biggest thing that we just don't factor in. It's an old saying, but I think it goes true with this, that if the deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. So I hope that answered your question. If you have any other questions, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to try and answer them as best I can. And for those of you out there with me, go Eagles, beat the Patriots. See you guys.